Thank you everyone for coming. I'm quite honored to be in an exhibition with Wayne and Yunsu. And all the same thanks that Wayne just said. Many thanks to Sang-Yeon for making this happen, all the DAT staff, and Jaein. I grew up in and was shaped by the force of the Chagrin River Valley east of Cleveland. My father, a woodland romantic, and my grandfather, a painter by passion, not profession, took my siblings and me on long walks along the bridle paths that cut by our home. Some days, if we were feeling wild, we left the established paths to follow the streambed to wherever, looking for crayfish in the low water of summer, or a tanager in the canopy above, or seeking smooth ice for skating in the winter. Always our meanders were quiet and slow as I learned to love moving through these forests. This is a photograph of a living room of the house that I grew up in. I would sit there for hours looking out this window, and as we were talking earlier with the question about the frame, this is where I learned how to make a photograph, by looking through this window. And I know that's why I became an 8x10 photographer, because of that, looking at the world through a rectangle. Also to note, the bird is a decal on the window that my parents put there to prevent birds from flying into it. But I want to note it now because birds figure a lot in my work. My earlier photographs were people-less, formal views of the landscape. It was really about me trying to figure out how to put the world into that rectangle, how to make that three-dimensional world become two-dimensional. I also love waterfalls and geology. So this picture is this beautiful rock basin of basalt, and this water seemingly falling from heaven. But I also love wildflowers and this little, I look a lot at details along the way. This is a sprig of foxglove growing along the trail. Some roses from the garden cut to take indoors. Nature sustains us in many ways, and beauty is one way that it sustains us. I was also drawn to the animals of these places and began photographing the way they are in the environment. This is called Spot Where an Elk Slept. It's in Yellowstone National Park. And I went out for a walk in the morning and I found all the matted grass where the elk slept that night. Spiders are also fascinating to me, so I have a small series photographing spider webs. And as I mentioned earlier, birds figure a lot in my work. So this is a bird nest along the trail. Fireflies? Do you have fireflies in Korea? I grew up with fireflies, and I think they're magic. So I have a small series photographing fireflies. And birds. These are some swallows flying over the Platte River in America. I soon began to feel something was missing in my work. I was spending a lot of time in the woods, but I was ignoring that presence in my photographs. Didn't I matter? Didn't humans count as part of nature? I became interested in the ways we interact with our environment. Sightseers, swimmers, fishers. This is a photograph of my mom and dad in a national park in America. And it's, I like this image because parts of my parents are in my work. My father could stand for hours just watching the light move across the landscape and would often remark, wow, look at that. And my mother loves looking at the little details, like the wildflowers along the way. So there's parts of both of them in my photographs. This is a place called Artist Bluff. So, of course, I had to hike up to a place called Artist Bluff. And it's this overlook. But to me, it's about the idea of sightseeing, the idea that we can gaze out onto the landscape. It's that interaction with the land as viewers. Oh, these are some fishermen of Love Waterfalls. So there's fishermen at the base of waterfall on Fall Creek. Again, it's that interaction with nature that I'm interested in, people interacting with nature. The title of this is Picking Wild Roses and Blackberries in the Backyard. This is the backyard of the house I grew up in. My sister and my niece, her children, my niece and nephew, and we just wanted to pick roses to take into their grandmother, my mother, and we wanted blackberries for breakfast. So I wanted to photograph just that interaction with nature. This is called My Cousins Gathering Clams for Dinner. And some cousins of mine, that every year we would get together at this spot along the sea and have a feast. So we're gathering the clams, and some people are out fishing, and then we come together in the evening to eat food. At this point in my work, I begin thinking about the idea of sustenance and how the earth sustains us, how we need the earth to survive. So I began spending time with hunters that hunt for food. So this was a bird hunter I went for a walk with. This is a moose. This was during the hunting series that I was doing. Swan hunting in Montana. And a swan. The swan season in Montana is right around the Thanksgiving, Christmas time. So this becomes, instead of turkey, this is the Thanksgiving meal, a goose or a swan. So also during this time period, over the last 25 years, I've been photographing national champion trees. A national champion tree is the largest tree of its species in America. And this is the largest sycamore tree. And with my niece, Katie, was about 8 years old, and she came with me on this adventure. This is the largest slippery elm with my nephew. As you can see, my nephew is reading, and my niece is reading. They know with an 8x10 camera, nothing happens fast. It's very slow, so they bring a book to read. National champion Western red cedar, Washington State, a very large tree. These cedars become huge, and this one was left standing because it was the champion, but in the middle of a clear cut. They took all the other trees out of this forest, and it was a forest. I think all the trees must have been at least that big, because I'm standing on a stump. I climbed up to the top of a stump of a tree that had to have been at least as big as that one. So it was an incredible forest that they clear cut, left this one because it's the largest. And one other thing about this, our sense of scale, the ring around the base is a sidewalk. National champion sugar maple. I know there's lots of maples in Korea. I've been seeing many maples here. And there's lots of maples where I live in America, but very different. And this is one of our most popular maple trees. It's a sugar maple. Yellow birch in Maine. A dwarf chinkapin oak in Kansas. So not every tree gets to be is a huge tree, right? So, but this happens to be the largest of this kind of tree. This is a choke cherry in Arizona, literally on that steep drop off. It's just down, and this choke cherry, is just trying to hang on there. A bur oak in Missouri. a holly leaf buckthorn at twilight. Then someone close to me died. I began photographing my loved ones with a fervor I had not before known. By securing my world in a photograph, I convinced myself it could not totally be taken away from me. At the same time, I began photographing light in the darkness, hoping to hold on to every last bit. I photographed fireflies in a jar, sunlight sparkling on leaves, a sunset, my mother dissolving into light as I learned of her Parkinson's, the moon setting, the stars. So this is a photograph of my nephew along the bayou. My father along the same bayou. I had photographed my family before this, but somehow it became much more important to really hold on to them as much as I could so that they would not leave. Photography is amazing for that. Some fireflies in a jar. The idea of holding on to light. It was very hard losing someone you care about, and so you want to hold on to the light. When I was kids, you used to run around and collect fireflies in a jar. So somehow that symbolically holding on to light was important to me. I did release them afterwards. This is a sunset. Again, this just that light at the end of the day that felt so important to want to hold on to. So in this picture, I just love that little slip of brightness as the sun goes down. This is a photograph of my mother at Christmas. There's lights from a tree reflected on the glass door that she's standing behind. This was the year that she informed us that she had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. So to me, it's my mother becoming the universe or fading into the universe. Parkinson's is a degenerative disease, so she's fading into the universe. Or you could also see it as our mothers are the universe, right? Our mothers, are the universe. Every clear night of the summer, my father would go out for a walk to look at the night sky. Many nights I would join him. We knew the North Star and the Big Bear, but the rest became our own. At times we stood still for an hour or more to watch for shooting stars. We had no agenda. It was all about amazement at a sky full of stars. So I began photographing about the night sky to remember those walks. And I love looking at a night full of stars, which is harder and harder to find now with more and more light pollution. So I wanted to figure out how to make a picture without the star trails. So I don't want to get into too much technical net right now, but this is about an hour-long exposure so that I record even the very faint stars. And I simply call it the Milky Way. Another picture of the stars at night in color. A few clouds passing by. Full moon, it's over a mountain pass. So there's the trees in the mountain. I'm interested in astronomy, so I began to meet a lot of astronomers. So I thought, why not put my 8x10 camera onto a telescope so that I could make a picture of the moon? So that's what this is. And it reminds me of the mystery. I can't compete with the Hubble telescope, and I'm not trying to compete with the Hubble, who is sending back amazing images from way, way away. I wanted to be reminded of the mystery right in our own sky. And when I was younger, I first saw Galileo's drawings he made of sunspots. Galileo was one of the first to look through a telescope, and he pointed it to the sun, and he's the one who discovered sunspots. Anyway, so this is my nod to Galileo and sunspots on the sun. I also love eclipse. So whenever there's an eclipse about to happen, I try to clear my calendar and get out to it. So this is a lunar eclipse over a bay near where I live. And a little bit of baseball trivia here. This is a lunar eclipse in 2004 the night the Boston Red Sox won the World Series. I think I was the only one outside photographing that night. Everyone else was glued to the TV. The title of this is Christmas Solar Eclipse in My Father's Hands. Again, it was an eclipse, a solar eclipse that was going to happen on Christmas Day, and we were all gathered together for the holiday. So I said, sorry about Christmas, we got to make this picture of the eclipse. So my family's all helping us make this picture, and at one point my father just did that with his hands, and that was the picture. Because don't our fathers sort of, present the universe to us? So there's my father presenting the universe. Oops. This begins the part about birds. The first image that entranced me as a child was a print from the 1930s that hung on my bedroom wall, as it had on my father's childhood wall before me. It was of a young girl sitting turned backwards on a bench in the woods, looking up into a birch tree next to her, looking up at a robin. She was so close she could have reached out and touched it. Birds to me are wonderment, a flash of color, a song. I love listening to and looking at birds. This is an indigo bunting, a lovely bird we have in New England. I love birds, and I knew for a long time that I wanted to photograph them. But how do you do that with an 8x10 camera? It's not a fast camera. It's not an action camera. But I knew from my childhood love of birds, I knew about people who study birds and that they catch them and can hold them and do their measuring and weighing. So I reasoned if I found those people, maybe they would let me photograph before they released the bird. And so that's what I did. I found a group of bird banders. Common yellowthroat. So the pictures began, for me it began to be, it was about the bird. I was just really interested in the colors, and so they're kind of close up like this. It's really about the bird. And this is a black-billed cuckoo. But it wasn't long before I realized the people were just as important to me as the birds, because I'm interested in people and nature. So I started making portraits of the people, and this is Beth with Carolina wren. There's a very similar bird in Korea that looks very much like this bird. This is Maggie with goldfinch. Emily with grackle. Dan with warbling vireo. But I'm still in love with the forest. So I wanted to make pictures of the people and the bird within the forest space of New England. So this is Beth with the catbird within the forest. And this is Paul with mourning dove. Later in life, I learned of the paintings of Fra Angelico. In them, I saw saints, palms turned toward heaven, reaching out. At times, it seemed reaching for the void, just reaching. When my mother was failing with Parkinson's and the dementia had its hold, she would reach out, just reaching upwards as if to hold on to something from heaven. Once I asked her what she was reaching for, she replied, "Oh, the birds." So I'm just showing a few photographs here of that moment of release when the bird bander is sending the bird back. So this is Beth releasing a goldfinch. This is Molly and Beth. Reaching out, holding on, letting go is what these pictures are about loving and losing. So this led to my new work titled Behold. My father was already dying when I arrived at his side. I read to him all through the night about birds migrating, birds flying. He always wondered, how did they know? Later, as we gathered around him, my mother reached for the birds she saw rising over him. I can still see my mother sitting, reaching skyward, heavenward, reaching for the birds. 감사합니다. 감사합니다.